this a perfect square, which is you can use your calculator and take a square root of 289, which is a square root of 289, which is a perfect square. 289 is 17 times 17. Okay, which is, again, if you have this thing here, which is, again, this is probably this is the only tedious part that a lot of students have, is, again, 7 plus or minus 17 is the same as 7 plus 17 and 7 minus 17. Again, the plus or minus, just reminder, this plus or minus is to show you that we have a plus and we have a minus. Okay, so again, it's just basically two problems. We lazy and we write plus or minus at one, but it's actually two problems. So again, 7 plus 17 will give you 24. 24 divided by 6 will give you 4. That's one answer. One answer is 4. And again, 7 minus 17 will give you negative 10. Negative 10 divided by 6, you reduce it to negative 5/3, which is, this is your second answer. So again, those are what we have, which is, again, if you don't see this formula, you have to factor out by AC method. And the AC method, 3 times 20 will give you 60. 60 is that two number multiplied to give you 60, but subtract to give you 7. I think it's like 15 and 8 or something. No. Something in that number. And then again, no, 12 and 5. 12 times 5 will give you 12 times 5 will give you 60, and 12 minus 5 will give you 7. So again, that's what you have if you do AC method before, but now with this formula, we can do any problem with our item here. Okay, so again, and again, the reason why I say it's powerful with this formula, let's take a look at one more problem, and then I will see if you guys have question. And again, we still have more problem to go over to help you with this formula. So one thing is, again, looking at this thing here, like I mentioned before, make sure that your equation is equal to 0. If it's not equal to 0, we have to convert this, or basically, again, this is what we have to do, is we have to move the item and make it equal to 0. So again, just same as before, make sure that it's equal to 0 first. Okay, so again, it's equal to 0, we're good to go, right? So again, the reason why I say that this item is powerful is this, ladies and gentlemen. Given this factor, given this problem here, x squared minus 4x minus 2, you cannot factor that, right? There is no way you can find two numbers multiplied to give you 2. There's no way you can find two numbers multiplied to give you 2, but subtract to give you 4. It's impossible. Everybody see that? So back then in chapter 6, we cannot do this problem here. This problem here, we cannot factor them. And if we cannot factor them, we just say we cannot do it. But now, because of this item here, we can identify your A, which is 1, your B, which is -4, your C, which is -2, which is now all we need to do is plug it into this formula, which is -B plus or minus P squared minus 4AC divided by 2A. If we plug it in, which is, again, the careless mistake a lot of students do. This is the careless mistake that some of you guys do on the test, is you forgot to put in a negative here, right? We have a negative in our formula. Our formula is -B, and my B is negative. So a negative and a negative, that will give me a positive, which is, this should be your item, which is +4 plus or minus 16 plus 8. -4 times -2 will give me 8 divided by 2. And again, this is what we have, which is, again, what is 16 plus 8? 16 plus 8 will give you 24. And this is the obstacle, and this is the problem of this quadratic formula. What is the obstacle and problem? Well, 24, if you recognize 24 is not a perfect square. And that is what we have to do, is we have to ask ourselves, is there a perfect square inside 24? which is, again, if you remember, 4 times 6 is 24, and 4 is a perfect square, which is what can I take it to the outside? What can I extract this 4 to the outside here? Because 4 is on the inside, I can take out 2, which is, again, I have 4 plus or minus square root of 6 over 2. Which is, again, everybody see that this is not a perfect square, unlike on this side, unlike this item here, 289, unlike 289 is a perfect square, and because it's a perfect square, it's come out to be 17. This thing here is not a perfect square, that's why we still have a lonely number on the inside of your root. So now, looking at this thing here, if you look at this thing here, we have a 4, we have a 2, and we have a 2 on the denominator. Everybody see that we can simplify this item here, which is we can say that 2 going to 4. We can say that 2 going to 4 is 2 times, and 2 going to 2 is 1 time, which is this is what you have in terms of 2 plus or minus square root of 6. It's basically you take the 2 and you divide into the 4 and into the 2. You cannot take the 2 and divide into the 6 because the 6 is inside your square root. Remember, the whole number cannot divide into the square root. Okay, so again, you only divide if you have a whole number on the outside, which is, again, 2 plus minus square root of 6 is the same as 2 plus 6 and 2 plus square root of 6 and 2 minus square root of 6. And ladies and gentlemen, this is your answer here, because this is your answer that we have, which is, again, it's not a perfect number because it's not perfect in terms that you can factor them out. Okay, and again, as you can see, there's no way you can find that number back then, but now with this formula you can find that answer, which is the two answer we have is 2 plus square root of 6 and 2 minus square root of 6. So again, question here, which is, this is why we go over chapter 10 first, right? Because we can extract our perfect square and there's something hidden inside, which is, again, this is pretty much the combination of chapter 6, shortcut to chapter 6, and review of chapter 10. So question with this A or B here. Let me erase all of this item. Again, question with this A or B in terms of this. Well, if you don't have question, let's take a look at the next two problem. And hopefully, by the end of today, you get used to this quadratic formula, right? So again, this is what we have, which is, again, this is your quadratic formula right here. So again, looking at this thing here, if you were to do this thing here, you would say, oh, Mr. Tran, I have to do the AC method, right? Back then in chapter 6, you have to do the AC method. And if you do the AC method, you won't get it, right? 4 times negative 9 to give you negative 36. There is no combination of 36 that subtract to give you 4, right? 36 times 1, 2 times 18, 3 times 12, 4 times 9, 6 times 6. There is no combination subtract to give you 4. So again, we stuck. If this in chapter 6, we stuck, right? But in chapter 11.2, the first thing we need to do is we need to verify that it's equal to 0, which is in this case is equal to 0. Once it's equal to 0, everybody see that we just need to identify your A, your B, and your C. In this case, your A is 4, your B is 4, and your C is negative 9. Once you do that, now all we need to do is plug into that formula, right? Negative B, right? Negative B plus or minus square root of B squared minus 4AC divided by 2A. So if you plug it in, this is what you should have, which is negative. In this case, negative B is negative 4 plus or minus 4 squared minus 4 is your formula, times 4 is your A, times negative 9 is your C, all over 2A. And again, 2 times 4. Once you have this, which is you have a negative, it's a negative 4. I forgot to put a negative out here. It's supposed to be -4, ladies and gentlemen. -4 plus or minus 16 plus 144. Again, 4 times 6, 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times 9 is 144. All over 2 times 4 is 8, which give me, again, this should give me -4 plus or minus 160 all over 8, which is, again, 160. 160 is not a perfect square, but is there a perfect square inside of 160? Which is, do you agree that 160 is the same as 16 times 10? 16 times 10 is 160. Why do I use 16? Because 16 is a perfect square. So what can come out? What can come out, which is, again, I can take the 4, which is, again, this is what we have, which is, again, I can take out a 4 and my lonely 10 still on the inside, which is, this is what I have here, which is, again, -4 plus or minus 4 square root of 10 all over 8. The only thing we need to do now is we need to reduce this item here, right? We need to reduce this item, which is the 4 here and the 4 here and the 8 here. Those are your whole number. And because your whole number, they have a common divider, we can reduce them, which is, again, basically you can cancel them out, which is